On this very fateful day, a farmer is seen plucking wheat from his field.
Does this ever happen to you?
Why are my crops not growing? Why? Is there anything that can help me? Oh.
Have no fear, your troubles will disappear. Firstly, this is how you can create your own rain gauge. Cut off the top of an empty plastic bottle and invert it. The inverted bottle top would act as a funnel to collect the rainwater. Markings on the side of the bottle will indicate the amount of rainwater collected. The amount of rainfall will determine the amount of fertilizer, soil, or water required to grow the crops.
One can roughly determine the amount of rainwater by comparing the water level with the markings on the bottle.
The readings from the rain gauge would not be entirely accurate because the surface area of the bottle would differ from other bottles which have a larger top. Several rain gauges also have to be placed around the field to obtain the average.
Now we proceed in showing you the sling psychrometer. Firstly, make sure that the water is at room temperature before using.
Add water to the wet bulb and dry bulb and record their initial temperature. Then proceed to spin the sling psychrometer in the air for about 1 minute. A higher relative humidity creates a favorable environment for fungus growth, which might hinder the growth of the crops. If there is a high relative humidity, less water is required to water the crops and vice versa.
One can roughly estimate the relative humidity of the surroundings by comparing the initial temperature and the final temperature readings to the relative humidity chart. One limitation of the sling psychrometer would be that water used to moisten the wet bulb might not be the same as the actual temperature of the surroundings. Here, we tell you more about the wind vane and how it works.
The purpose of a wind vane is to determine the direction of the wind. Place the wind vane in a windy area with the north marking facing north. After a while, observe the direction that the arrow is pointing at. The arrow will point to the direction from which the wind is coming from. This will allow the prediction of the direction of which the monsoon is approaching from and relocate the crops if necessary.
The wind vane is not very accurate as we cannot tell how far north or south the wind is coming from, and it requires a compass to determine the north.
In this segment, we tell you more about the minimum and maximum thermometer and how it works.
Leave the thermometers overnight at a location and come back the next day to check on the readings. When the temperature rises or falls, the signals will be pushed upwards and rest in the capillary in a free position. This will allow us to know when to water the crops, which specific crops to grow, and different locations to plant different crops. The purpose of the maximum and minimum thermometers is to determine the maximum and minimum temperature.
The limitations for the minimum and maximum thermometer would that be it requires a day to measure the temperature and to get the readings. Lastly, we tell you more about the wind anemometer.
The purpose of the anemometer is to determine the speed of the wind. It will consist of 4 plastic cups which will catch the wind, causing them to revolve. Hold it up in the air and stay still. Then, observe the readings as the ring around the pole moves up and down to determine the wind speed. Once the wind speed is determined, the conditions of where crops are planted are known to be either favorable or not. If there is too much wind, crops will suffer due to high rates of transpiration, and therefore they might have to be relocated to somewhere else with lower wind speed.
Here are some of the limitations of the anemometer. Since the anemometer is not a very sensitive equipment to determine wind speed, it requires a significant amount of wind for it to measure the wind speed, and therefore it is unable to detect small amounts of wind, thus making the results inaccurate.
And if it spins at this rate, you should most probably run away as a gale or tornado might be heading towards you.
Yes! My crops are finally growing. Thanks to the equipment, I know where and where to plant my crops. Woohoo! Yeah!